All right, so we're going to get going. Jerome's stuck in a little bit of traffic out of Boston, but we just talked on the phone. He said to get going, so maybe he'll arrive just in time for his overview. So maybe it will be seamless anyway. So I know you all know who I am. It's really exciting. It's actually one of the highlights of the semester is the Hall of Fame induction, and particularly this roundtable with entrepreneurs and budding entrepreneurs to share stories back and forth and exchange ideas and insights as part of this. So the way this will work is I'm going to ask each of the inductees talk a little bit about their career, their path, post-UNH to where they are today. You have their bios, so a lot of it's in there, but it always is better for those of you like me who don't like to read, to hear it in person. And then a little Q&A. So I ask a little bit about their journey questions, and then we're going to flip the script. I'm going to have pick on or offer people to talk about their company, problems that you have in order to get sage advice of Hall of Fame of inductees. Just so you know who's in the room, wide range of students. So we have students in our first year program called the Idea and Innovation Society. So these are students that have been on campus for all of maybe 6 weeks, right? 7 weeks maybe. But they've already started a company, a nonprofit, or been active in innovation in high school. So just for those in the society, just raise your hand. Great. We also have students who are in our Shaw Explorers program. So that's David and John Shaw, select group that really are focused on external exploration of innovation and entrepreneurship in different industries and what that means, whether it's the arts, whether it's technology. We all were out in a lobster boat a couple weeks ago, understanding down in Seabrook that business and how that works. Sorry, a number of them also are in the society, have and are working on companies, so you hear from them. We have some juniors and seniors here, and some, actually I guess, older Shaw Explorers. I'm looking at Derek. We also have 2 grad students who are rock stars in their own right. You'll definitely hear from them. And then we have some young alums who started here at the ECenter and have prospered, both launched companies, and so you'll hear from them. So a really wide range of students that have been engaged and benefited from the ECenter. So we'll start with that. So Fred, since you were promptly on time, even though you flew for the furthest away today from Florida, you were the first to arrive. So if you wanted to start a little bit of your background and how you got to where we are.
Yeah, it's always surreal coming onto campus and seeing young people and also seeing the school, because all these memories flowing back of living in Stoke and Congreve and having, but it's, we're lucky to be in New England, and we're lucky to be in New Hampshire and live free or die. We've, 83 was a different time. We weren't at war. We were, life was pretty free and casual, and I ended up in UNH 1979, and school wasn't really for me. And long story short, I had a friend that was in real estate, and I got lucky enough to do an internship my second year. The first year I probably was just about invited back. I probably was a little bit in that C range, and so a friend of mine was in real estate. He had decided not to go to college, and so I did an internship at UNH in 1980. Real estate was my interest, and I was able to get credits for working a full year in Maine working for a real estate company. And that really, I got a full semester of credits, but when I think back to where you are now, a lot of the starting students, that was probably the best education I could have had, because I got thrown right into the workforce. And at the time, interest rates went from 9% to 16%. And I had like 6 deals under contract, and I had them all blow up except for 2. And I had to move two of the people out of a 4-unit to close on the deal, and another farmhouse that had all kinds of issues. But it taught me that life versus a textbook, life versus reality was 2 completely different things. And I think coming here to the ECenter, I think that's really what you're learning here. So fast forward, I got an opportunity in a real estate deal in Kennebunkport in 92. It was a failed real estate deal, and I had to do something with that real estate to create a value in it. 92 was another time when real estate was in a tough space, And I tried to get a friend of mine who owned Gritty McStuffs to put a brew pub in Kennebunkport versus Portland and put a second location. Long story short, it ended up putting a tenant that was in the building with a little lobster operation in as the brewer because Gritty McDuff's didn't want to. They decided not to do it. And a week before we were supposed to open and I'd raised $300,000 for the tenant, the husband and wife got in an argument. The wife said she didn't want to be married anymore. And in fact, she was leaving and it was my fault. The chef, who was the other partner, got mad at me and said, I'm done. I'm not going to run this brewery. So next thing you know, I'm a real estate guy running a brew pub in Kennebunkport, Maine. And that was 30 years ago. So now we own 22 restaurants and a brewery in Maine, a brewery in New Hampshire, and a brewery in Florida. And it happened really because of a lot of the lessons I learned in that internship of, you're in a situation, you got to figure it out, you got to keep moving. And when it feels like you're never going to figure it out is when you can't quit. You got to keep working it. And if you put good people around you with good products, quality things, good things happen. So that's
Thank you.
Long, short story.
Great kickoff.
Okay.
Tanya, go ahead.
You'll have to forgive me. I'm not much of a public speaker. That's why I went into finance and accounting. I absolutely am very uncomfortable talking in front of people. So I grew up very low, middle class. I can remember having condiment sandwiches for dinner because we didn't have anything to go between the two pieces of bread other than ketchup or mustard. First one in my family, cousins and aunts and uncles involved that went to college, worked 3 and 4 jobs while I was here in order to pay tuition. I actually worked in 2 of the nastiest places you can work on this campus, which is the dining hall and the horse barns. So, and I actually started off my route was kind of a little strange. I actually started off pre-veterinary medicine. And after organic chemistry and 6 hours of genetics lab, when all of my friends only had 4 3-hour classes a week, I was burnt out and changed my major to English literature because I love to read and it was a nice, easy fix. Then about a year later, I went, what am I going to do with that? And went on and got another degree in accounting so that I could go on and actually find a job. Basically worked for other people for quite some time. And then I met this handsome and dapper young man who swept me off my feet. And one day we were chatting about how much I hated my boss because he was kind of a misogynist. And he was telling me how he was really struggling to find somebody who could deal with the finances and run the company while he was out running the jobs and getting the work. And it was supposed to be a temporary position, and 25 years later, I am now the CFO of this company that when I joined it was 4 people and is now 132 employees, $34 million company that's in about 30 different states, and all the joys that come with that and all the heartache that comes with it. I mean, I would not change anything. I am very pleased with where I am. I can't say that I can explain to you exactly how to start a company, but I can certainly talk to you about what are some of the challenges you're going to come up with, regulatory, and just dealing with the administrative pieces of this company that you're forming, because you can have great ideas, but if you don't know how to make the money and how your money, what is happening with your money, you're not going to be successful.
That's great.
Quick question. Who's that guy?
I'm Tom Moulton. How are you all today? I have no problem speaking in public, as you'll probably figure that out. Sometimes I talk too much, so throw something at me if I go too long. I started my entrepreneurship when I was 10 years old. I was telling Tanya earlier, 1965. I took all of my money, $27 that was in the bank, and $27 in 1965 was a lot of money. I think the minimum wage might have been $1 or $1.25. You know, people making $40 a week, you know, adults with families. So I took that money and I bought a paper route, $1 a customer, was $27 from a kid named Robbie Lonigan in my neighborhood. And I came from a pretty poor family. My parents didn't, they were blue collar people. Father was a machinist, my mother was a secretary, but with 4 kids under the age of 6, she couldn't work and whatever. So I bought this paper route, and that was kind of like my first taste of entrepreneurship. And I was telling Tanya, in 3 weeks, I went around and knocked on the door of all the neighbors in the neighborhood, and I went and I recruited 27 more customers. I had 54 customers. So a little mindset said, geez, if I just bought this for $27 in 3 weeks, I just have 54 customers. If I wanted to sell it, I could get $54. That's not the case, because that was, but the point is that got me interested in entrepreneurship. And that, there was the papers were 10 cents and you charged a penny to deliver it. So it was 66 cents a week, Monday through Saturday. So you had to make a commitment after school, rain, you know, snow, sleet, whatever, you had to deliver the papers. And that's how I made my little money. I would go downtown and pay my bill. Whatever money I had left over, I bought baseball cards and gum and candy, which a 10-year-old kid would do. I could, you know, God rest my mother's soul, but I probably had a fortune in baseball cards because I was really into baseball. They're gone. But if they were around today, they'd be worth a small fortune. And at Christmas time, you'd get like $1 tip. So I was like, wow, all of a sudden I get $50. I bought my own bicycle, a Schwinn Continental. I have it hanging in my warehouse to remind me where I came from. So if you ever came to my plant, it's there. The Portsmouth Herald actually did a story about it because it's the lessons I learned when I was younger that made me what I am today. And then I bought my skates, because my parents couldn't afford it, and I bought a pair of Bauer Supreme skates for $60. I was a hockey player. I came to UNH in the 70s. Was one of the last people to get cut on a team that was very, very good. 12 guys went to the NHL, and I have a lot of friends that were in the NHL, so it was pretty good. So fast forward, I don't have a resume. I never have had one. I've never been on a job interview, and I've always worked for myself. So that kind of tells you that I don't know what I'm doing half the time. But it's the truth, I don't. And I just kept my head down and kept going. I worked for my father, the family business. It was a machine shop. We did about 10 million in sales in the mid 80s, had 130 people working there. My father walked in one day and fired me. It's a long story. If he offered me $1 million, I couldn't tell you why he fired me, but my younger brother, I think, had something to do with it to get me out so he could take over, kind of like the J.R. Ewing of Dallas. So I had to start over again, and so I was newly married. I'm up there. I sold my BMW because I didn't have any money. My wife had just married me, and she's saying, God, I just married this guy, he had this good job, and I'm cleaning a refrigerator while she's going off to work. True story. Since then, and I'll try to be succinct with this thing, I've started into real estate. Well, my next deal was, I was gonna move that company up to Hampton, and I put everything on the line. My father pulled the plug on that, and I flipped the real estate. I bought this building for I think it was $1.4 million, and I bought the building. He pulled the plug on it. I'm sitting, you gotta be kidding me. Now I'm gonna be totally broke. I had a little bit of equity in my home, not a lot. I'm making $40,000 a year. And I said, whoa, and the meter's clicking at 10 grand a month. I took a $5,000, you'd remember this, Ian, because you're in real estate, in the Boston Globe in October of 1986. It cost $5,000 for this ad. Remember, that's all the money in the world when you're making 40 grand a year, all right? And I put it in the Sunday Globe and the Tuesday Business section. And I sold the building for pretty much what I bought the 2 lots and the building for. I sold it, and I had the 2 lots free and clear. And I got offered for one of the lots $250,000. So I said, I just made $500,000 on paper. Now, I never sold the land. I ended up developing it because when I got fired, I needed something to do. So what do? You go borrow $1.4 million and you build a building. And then when that got done the next year, I only have half the building filled up. You go borrow another $1.4 million and build the next building. And now I'm digging a hole deeper and deeper and deeper. And I almost lost everything until Timberland showed up and rented both the buildings from me. So I've really been from rags to riches, and I've been there twice. I know what it's like to be up and down, so I have a good sense of myself from top to bottom. Since then, to wind up a little bit, I played Monopoly when I was in elementary school, and I play a lot of Monopoly. I own a lot of real estate. and I've leveraged it. I buy buildings that are kind of decrepit, and I have a construction company that fix them up, so I get value added. To just put some real numbers, I think I bought a building for $550,000 like 6 years ago, put $300,000 into it. I was offered like 2 years later $1.4 million. So you do the math, and now it's worth $2 million and whatever. I just want to give you real numbers so you know this is how it works. It doesn't always work that way. I had one that went south, but I got out of it. And then since the real estate, I got into the medical business. I make sleep apnea masks. We're one of the few companies in the world that make sleep apnea and non-ventilation masks. 53 countries. We're right in Hampton. I have probably a dozen patents that surround this gel material. It's really kind of cool. So 5 or 6 years ago, right, I get pissed off and say, I'm tired of fighting these billion-dollar companies and getting run over. I can't even get my mask in Exeter Hospital, and I'm an American company. I'm right down the street. And I designed the best N95 mask in the world. I don't have to tell you where we went with that. We did almost $50 million in sales in 2020. And that was pay dirt. And that just said us, everything's paid for. The market's gone down, but we have to reinvent ourselves. We got to get it over to Europe. Well, I can talk more about that later, but been a very interesting ride. And I have a lot more successes, a lot more failures than I have successes. But like you were saying, Fred, just pull your bootstraps up and you kind of just try to figure it out. And that's part of the fun of life, is figuring it out. And I would recommend, if you do, as you go forward, get a mentor. Not somebody in the family. Find someone you can trust, and someone that you know could be not a family member, but someone's a friend. And get a mentor and someone that knows what they're doing to help guide you. That's about it. Sorry I talked so long.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Scott?
Great. I'm Scott Knightley. I graduated here in '86, kind of same time frame as some of these guys here, and I went to get a job with College Pro Painters and got rejected. And my thought on that was I had too many of my own ideas, and they just wanted somebody to cookie cutter their plan, and they didn't want me. And I'm like, well, okay, well, I'll go out and do my own thing. So I started in my dorm room back in '85. And now it's been 38 years, and we've just been a slow grow all the way up through. Like the others here, we've purchased real estate along the way. We've got real estate in 4 different states, and we're working on that. The company has grown from a small startup, like my wife had mentioned, and now we're working in 30 states with 130 guys and doing almost all exclusively federal work now. So we're doing sarin gas, mustard gas removal, building removal, UXOs, which are bombs and things like that we find in the dirt. We demo buildings for the government. We work on projects out in South Dakota, North Dakota, South Carolina. And anything that's a difficult job is what I want. I don't want the easy stuff because anybody can do it. So you find a difficult job, you buy the equipment for it, you're the first into the industry, so you can charge what you want and you can get going on it. I think what you hear from everybody here is you just got to work. There's no easy way to do it. You got to put your nose to the grindstone and work. When I started out, when I was in college, I set my schedule up so that I had classes on Monday nights, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and I worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And I'd get up in the morning and I'd work, do accounting and things like that, and then I'd work all day, and then I'd meet customers in the evening because we were just doing it in New England, and that's it. You just got to work. People seem to think it's easy, and you do hear about all these, well, I had this great idea and it went to $1 billion and now I've retired at 25. Well, that's very few people get that, and God bless them to do it. But at the end of the day, it's hard work. It's not easy, but if you believe in yourself and you do it and you get up 5 o'clock in the morning and go into work, and it will go through steps and ebbs and flows. One of the biggest things that I always mention to people is it's a step thing. You start off here. If you don't do that next step, you're not going to make it. You need to go to that next step. Whether it's, for us, it was health insurance, and to get better people, you needed 401ks and all that. And then you go along and it's fine, and then you start to hear the rumbling in the company. You got to make that next step. And it's been that same step process for 38 years. Some shorter, some longer, but then you also have to have, you have a mentor. You got to talk to people. The other thing that I did a lot of is I was on the National Demolition Association as president, which was worldwide. And what I did is I just listened to what everybody else did in our industry, from South Korea to Australia to Japan or wherever, and you pick up innovative ideas, you listen to what they're doing, you take them home, you apply them to your business and your industry, and be innovative and be cutting edge. and you got to be thinking ahead. And you've heard it 1,000 times, don't work in your business all the time, work on your business. It's tough to do when you start, but as you go, you really have to step back and figure out where you're going, because 5 years goes by quick, 10 years goes by quick, and then all of a sudden you're 59 and you really don't know what you're doing anymore. But the other thing, and I'll say working with my wife is awesome, because it's one part of the company that I don't have to worry about. Finances was done by someone that I 100% trusted. That doesn't work for everybody. We hear it all the time. Oh my God, you work with your wife. It's great working with my wife. She's way smarter than me with the finance by far, and that gives me the opportunity to do the stuff that I don't, and she's a little bit of a check. I can get a little bit off track, and she's like, yeah, it sounds like a great idea, but I don't really think you should do that. And I'm like, and kind of step back a little bit and do that. And the other thing is, enjoy life. I don't go to work every day. I love what I do. I absolutely love going into the office. I love being with all the people that we have. I love doing all of that type of stuff. So if you're in it for the money, I get it. Everybody needs money, but that won't last that long, because the stresses will get to you. Everything will get to you. You really need to love what you're doing and believe in what you're doing. So I think everybody at this table really believes what they do, and they love it. And I don't go to work every day. I love to go to work. I'll work a weekend, I'll work a Saturday. I don't have to anymore. And then the other thing is travel and spend some time with your family. Eventually they'll get there. My boy goes here now. He's a freshman. He's a sophomore now in the ball school. And so it's pretty exciting that we travel with them when they have the Christmas break off, and we go as a family and do things. So it's take some time for yourself, but hard work is really where it's at. Nobody's going to give it to you. Nobody's going to do it for you. And then believe in yourself. So that's my story.
That's great. Thanks so much. So when Jerome comes, we'll have him hop in. But between there, it's an interesting observation to think about. So obviously, you're the generation of COVID, right? So high school, college. And there's two complete opposite stories of the impact of the pandemic and that, right? So with Fred, I remember being on the phone the day, I'm not speaking out of school, but obviously in the restaurant industry in COVID, you know what happened, right? Basically, everything got shut down. I remember Fred saying, I just got off the phone, I just had to lay off 300 people.
936.
There we go, even worse, right? And having that moment, that you took time to talk to me on that day was still thoughtful. And then the flip side is Tom, right, was opportunistic, and which I'll ask that question too, but had the technology to be like, well, masks are a requirement at that, right? So always remember, like, there are cycles in business, but there also depends upon where you are in that cycle, about whether you can, and it's amazing, I want to ask you more about like how you did get through and then to come back up. But that's just an interesting parallel in a group of 4 people to have that piece of it. So with that, open it up for you all to ask additional questions of the inductees for what they've only teased a fraction of their experience, what they've done. So questions for them as it relates to their industry, and then we'll flip the switch to have you talk about your companies and your ideas. Go ahead, Derek.
I guess I can start. So outside of your own industries you're involved in, this is always a question I ask people who come to speak. What are like 3 to 4 emerging markets that you're interested in that are outside of your wheelhouse that you're keeping an eye on? This could be emerging technologies, emerging industries, maybe something new in demolition. What are you guys interested in the next 5 years?
Start this way and go, or every
either way.
I can start. Robotics and AI stuff. I mean, with labor being constricted and where you can get people, we've gone robotics. So we're in demo and hazardous waste and bombs, so we really don't want anybody anywhere near it. So we've gone to remote controlled demolition machines, we've gone to drones for doing job sites, we've done all kinds of high tech stuff to keep the people out of harm's way. And I think it's going to go further and further. We were at a conference for the National Demolition Association, and they were running an excavator on the jobs. I was able to run the excavator on the job site, and then the guy in Phoenix, Arizona was running that same excavator that I was running down in San Diego. So that's where you see it in the drone industry, but it's coming all the way back down to the fundamentals of demolition. And if you're going to look at your people and safety and how you're going to do that, that's going to be the next bastion, I think, of things that are going on out there.
Especially labor, you're right, Scott, the way labor's going.
Labor and
really big
safety
one.
are the two biggest drivers for us.
Yeah.
One of the big things for us also is the technology that we use, because we've got people all over the country now. The ability to get the data and information that we need from them, whether it's payroll, whether it's information about the jobs, whether it's information on the equipment, having, if people who are innovative and have that ability to create those applications are really going to go far, because there's going to be that need, and it's just going to continue to grow. We're constantly searching for the right application that works for our system. And if you have somebody who would have the ability to design something specific for, come into you and say, what are your exact needs, and let me cater this application for you and design it just for your needs, would be very helpful a lot of times.
This whole NFT thing and blockchain and trying to figure out how it's going to impact everybody's business, but it's going to impact, I think, consumer goods, I guess, and direct to consumer, and all this stuff that is going to evolve our world. And media and technology's gotten more involved in consumer goods as well as the restaurant business, because ordering from no humans, again, labor. But so I've spent all this time watching was it Jimmy V or the different guys on YouTube talking about the blockchain technology, because that's going to be the transparent next wave of how we all do contracts theoretically. And I don't necessarily understand it, but so I think understanding that, if it's at some point it's going to transition to the point of where it becomes like if you believe what some people are saying. I have shipyard.com, and I had it before Philip Morris and Miller Brewing and all those companies, because they didn't believe the internet was going to be something at the time, because they were already established. And we had email before them, which is kind of weird, because we did a joint venture with them in '96. And then all of a sudden in 24 hours, they had it all, poof, because it was working at our little company. So I see that being the same way with blockchain, and I see it, and I don't understand it at all, but I just get the sense that it's going to be there. Everybody in this room's got to understand it, because a certain segment of the market's going to do it. It's just like when we had the internet blow up and everybody invested in internet stocks and then they crashed, everything everybody was banking on 15, 20 years ago is happening right now. It's just like you press your button and boom, 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 it shows up tomorrow morning. Your shoes, your hat. You walk into a mall today, we used to go to the Newington Mall, be packed. Now there's nobody at the malls. Freeport, Maine was booming. And now you go to downtown, there's nobody there, because everybody, is buying from Amazon. And when I was sitting in your seats, there was no such thing. So I think blockchain, understanding it, and then trying to get lucky enough to find people that you can trust that actually can apply it to your business. So we've been doing a lot to look at that for reward programs and other things. And
So Derek will be able to educate you on that. When you flip the script, he's all about blockchain. He is Mr. NFT and blockchain, so it was perfect answer to set him up. So thank you, Fred.
Yeah, he laid that one right up there.
Exactly.
So with my experience, I don't really have a stock portfolio. I have some money in my 401k and Roth, but I've always invested in what I think works. So I'm kind of the anomaly. I like to listen to new things because I'm involved in so many things, but my wheelhouse is real estate, medical developments. In the medical business, you're always going to have new inventions to make people's quality of life better. So I'm in that space. So I'm always looking for the next things like robotics. I want to get a system. I'm trying to automate my manufacturing plant as much as I can. That stuff interests me, but I will take my capital and deploy it in what I do best. That's so I'm limited, but I'm always open to listen to new things. So, like I said, I had a golf company that failed, a computer company that failed. I have a restaurant. I swore I'd never get, that one failed, then I got another one. I swore I'd never get in that again. I own the Tailgate Tavern over in Stratham with a buddy of mine that said, just run it. I'm the money guy. Neil from the 100 Club runs it for me. I've got a really good one for you. Anybody here at Planet Fitness? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're looking at one of the original owners right here. All right? So that I started that, and my friend John Kane, who's a real estate guy and at a construction company, and the two brothers that owned it at the time, we came in and showed them, we basically came in and got them built out, found the real estate, and then they did a great job running the place. So, but they were very difficult partners. And so after 3 years, we made $1 million in a gym. Came four gyms: Portsmouth, Rochester, Dover, the original one, and Concord. And we made about $1 million. So we're doing good. And all of a sudden, everybody thinks we're rich. And they wanted all this big expenses. And I said, no, because if this thing goes south, they're coming after John and me. So we had a little bit of friction. I said, you know what, I'm better off getting out of this thing. But it cost me about $250 million I would have had when we sold out. So, you know, but I don't look in the rearview mirror. I just look forward. I don't cry about it and think about it. It was great because I know I was one of the guys that really made that place go, and my partner, John. So I go with my gut a lot, and I invest in the things that I like. So I'm not a guy watching TV and say, but I do like to know what the next best thing. I'm always open. I have more people call me with ideas to try to run them by me. And I'm pretty good at that because I started a lot of stuff from scratch. So I can give you the questions to answer. Scott, I'm sure, could do the same thing, and Fred and Tanya. You know, we've been there, and you got to think on your feet. And I don't know if that helps you, but that's.
Thank you. So I want to welcome Jerome. It's actually very timely because we're talking about robotics. So, so each of the inductees to give a brief overview of their post-UNH journey and the business that they got into. So, actually, your timing was perfect because for those of you who haven't read his profile, you're going to hear about robotics and that. So go ahead.
So we just do post-UNH, is that what you want to talk about?
Yeah, post-UNH to...
Well, UNH is a blur for the rest of us.
For a lot of us, yeah. Thanks to all that shipyard. Jerome Dubois, thank you everyone for having me here. So I graduated UNH fall of '96. I took the 4.5-year program that probably some of you are familiar with. I actually started as a business major, almost failed out of WSB, which is now a different name school, out of Whittemore, and then said I was going to transfer to engineering up the road, and they kind of laughed at me when I said that, but I ended up graduating with a mechanical engineering degree. I knew I was never going to be a mechanical engineer, so immediately after UNH, I literally 2 weeks after my final exams, I walked down to downtown Boston and moved into my dorm at Northeastern and started my MBA program there. And it was an expedited MBA program. I was the only guy to study supply chain and finance in my MBA program. Graduated and went to a software company that did supply chain software, warehouse management software for warehousing. So I kind of joke that my entire educational career, I studied mechanical engineering, supply chain, and finance, and that really results in robots and warehouses. That's kind of how I ended up in that industry. So I spent 10 years in the software side of supply chain, and then the last 10 plus years of my career has been in robotics and software technology, supporting a lot of companies that you've probably heard of. The initial company that I worked with was called Kiva Systems. That was acquired by Amazon. It's now called Amazon Robotics. They are the largest manufacturer of automated robotics in the world at this point. When I joined the company, there was 100 people in the company. So Amazon's deployed out over 500,000 of those robots throughout their warehouses globally. And then the second company that I co-founded, was Six River Systems, which took a different slant on robotics, and we were acquired by a company called Shopify that some of you are probably familiar with back in 2019. So now I'm working with Shopify, building out their logistics practice and effectively helping merchants, entrepreneurs who are launching their websites and building out their businesses, fulfill orders more effectively to compete with Amazon to help grow their business. So that's kind of where I'm at now. So is that a quick enough bio?
Perfect.
All right.
Fantastic. So again, just open it up for questions for the inductees. Go ahead, Rita.
I was curious. I'm sure there is a few of you who don't exactly know what it is, that you had an interest in entrepreneurship, but you didn't have a specific goal on what kind of product or what kind of industry you wanted to get into. How did you discover what your passion was and what industry really just was drawn to you?
I'm sorry, we started doing lead abatement on historic houses and stuff throughout the country. Nobody was doing it. The only state in the country that was doing it was Maryland. They had a lot of poisoning cases, and it was a huge opportunity. Nobody was in it. I got my contractor's license is 1, and my inspector's license was 1 because it was the first one to do it. And it's an opportunity, and then that opportunity peters out as other people enter the market. So you look for new and emerging markets, almost like what's new and up and coming. You do that all the time. You can't be looking back. You got to look what's the new thing? Because you can do something that can be obsolete in a very short period of time. So you just go where you can find the money that interests you and make it happen. It wasn't any rocket science for me. I'm like, I can make some money there because nobody's doing it. And I love doing woodworking and restoring buildings and doing that when I was in college and in high school. So all of a sudden it's like, that's a perfect fit. Nobody's doing it. And I can make a lot of money at it. So kind of like the paper route, right? You go from 27 to 54 to, you just find an opportunity and you go for it. And there's a lot of, probably with this group, is probably a lot of more physical opportunities out there. Probably a little bit more intellectual opportunities for a lot of people now that we probably don't know. Well, some of the people know about that, but we're more physical. All of us are buying real estate. That's always a good investment, but you're always looking for creating wealth and finding the next emerging market. So that goes right back to Derek's question, that what's the next thing on the horizon?
Gotta interest you a little bit, though. So it's like the Spanx lady in Florida, Clearwater. I mean, she made $1 billion. She liked fashion. She created something that fit her and worked for her, and all of a sudden it blew up. But you got to have a little bit of, you got to feel good. You got to feel gratified after whatever it is you do. If you find a little bit of that and you do a little more of it and feel it, then go with it. So.
It's not about the money, I think. It's about the general gist.
What Scott said earlier, what Fred just said, you got to be passionate. Find what you like to do, and then follow it. The money will follow, but just find out what it is. I got forced into mine in real estate, right? I told you about the real estate deal that happened when my father pulled the plug on me. So I had, by necessity, I had to find a job, and I said, well, I did pretty good on the real estate. What better way to build a building, rent it out, have somebody else pay the mortgage? Over time, you can take a little bit off to live off, pay the mortgage down, you wake up 20 years later and the building's paid for. And then you've got this annuity that's coming in. That's how I connected my real estate stuff, you know what I mean? And I always like building stuff, so getting in the medical business and building sleep apnea masks. I grew up, I was a kid, it was in a machine shop. I liked working on machines, liked building things, even though I'm not a mechanical engineer, but I can read blueprints, I know how to run a lathe and a Bridgeport and a CNC machine. So we started, putzing around with things and 3D printers, and it was great. But it's what I like to do, and I think what they're all saying is, if you like what you do, it'll happen, and you just got to figure out what that is.
Yeah, for me, I'm a total geek. I love puzzles, especially number puzzles. So being an accountant is like a dream job for me. When people put things in front of me that say I can't figure out where these numbers are running to, I can always figure them out. But I think that one of the keys is, like everybody says, it's got to be something that you're good at. Find something that you're good at and make it your passion. They always say, oh, follow your passion. Well, your passion might not be something you're good at, and you're not going to succeed. Find something that you're good at and find the market for it, and then be ready to pivot. And you have to, no matter what kind of position you're in, because you've heard from several people on this panel that something has gone wrong for them and they've had to go in a totally different direction. And you heard with COVID, where restaurants went versus masks. And for us, we had the situation where we lost a lot of different jobs. All of our residential work went down because nobody wants you in their house. But we figured out a way to actually do COVID cleaning for the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and brought in even more money than what we lost by not having other work to do. And it's about finding that pivot. It is looking to see where you can go with the next thing. When we were younger, nobody talked about mold. It was just, you sprayed it with some bleach, it was gone. One of the things that happened with us is we realized that was going to be an emerging market, and you stumbled with it for a little bit, and now that's a big part of what we do is dealing
we went out
with.
and just bought another company because we needed the people.
And just building on that, I think too, it's also important to keep your head up and look at those opportunities and look at the trends. To your point, Tanya, I think it's important to think a little bit ahead. You look at high labor markets like all of us are involved with. I get to work on the automation and technology side of that. That's kind of helping folks do that hard work. And it doesn't take much for you to kind of read what's happening in the labor markets out there, and just spend some time being aware of those things. The passion is important. The things that you're good at are important. But then the luck also happens by placing yourself in the situation where you can get lucky, right? And that there is a natural demand for the things that you're doing. So,
Really, I would say the harder you work, the luckier I get.
yeah.
It's like the proximity thing, right? If you're there,
Yep.
if you're in the environment, put yourself out there, the opportunities will come to you. You know, I started an aviation company. I have 3 aircraft right now, and it was more of a passion of mine, of a hobby. And just by putting it out there, we're actually building a little bit of a, you know, a Part 91 they call it, but I've got a jet and a twin engine, and next thing you know, all these people are coming to me, and next thing I know, I'm getting it leased out. And you can't make a lot of money at it, but you can pay the bills, and it's something that I enjoy. So, but if I wasn't out there, I wouldn't have had these opportunities. It's exactly right. It's that proximity factor. So, getting involved, whether it's a trade association, right, Scott? I was in the National Tooling and Machining Association. I knew everybody in the country that had manufacturing plants. With a demo association, I'm sure you knew everybody.
Yeah, and the nice thing,
valuable networking,
yeah, because the nice
right?
thing is,
Freddie, in your industry?
asking a guy a question who's in California is not your competitor.
Yeah.
At least in our industry, right? So you can ask questions to these people, and if you're friends with them, a lot of it just happens at the bar after the thing. How do you guys deal with this? Yeah. And they're more than willing to help. There's not one person in this room that wouldn't be willing to help anybody out because you're passionate about your business and your industry, so you just want to talk about it. But you got to get out there. You got to go to these trade associations. You got to sit at the bar after the party's over and talk to anybody and everybody. I probably talk to too many people, probably like what Tom's saying, but I love talking to people and figuring out what's going on, and you get ideas from that.
And you may not find your dream job day one, and this thing that you read about today, failure to launch. Like people, well, I don't know if I want to do that, so I'm not going to try that. Like, don't be afraid to try something. Don't be afraid to go get a job and work in a company you think you might want to own, because you might be in the best spot to then have the guy that's 70 years old or 62 who says, all right, you take it over, I'm sick of it, you know? And that too is another way to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to create anything. You can find, I had a buddy of mine who got into a payroll company and it was doing 30 million. The guy was sick of doing it. He took it to 100 million and he sold it for a lot of money, but he enjoyed doing it. He got a reward out of it, but he started as an employee. So to be an entrepreneur, you don't necessarily need to invent or create the whole new thing, because then you can do like, you know, I mean, Tom's done 30 different businesses, you know, it's just great. But but you know, the thing that's probably consistent with all of us is that you get rewarded, there's gratification in what you're doing. And if you find that you're not doing that, well then get what you can out of the day and then go to the next day. But don't sit there and go, I'm not gonna, like I see a lot of young people stuck. They're not going to try something because I don't want to be that, or I don't want to do that. I think you're going to gain knowledge from everything you do every day. Every person you meet, you don't know how it's going to relate to something you might need later. And today, there's never been a better way to network. It's never been easier to start a business. People say, well, it's very difficult. I can be on a ski lift and close a deal and talk to a guy in Europe and do this, do that, all from my cell phone. We used to have to be at a fax machine or send a letter or whatever. And it's really incredible, the world we have right now. I honestly don't think it's ever been a better time to start a business or be in business. And the opportunity is incredible right now. I mean, you guys are graduating or in school. You got the best labor pool we ever had. 1983, we're fighting just to get in front of companies to try to get a job because there were so many people looking for jobs. And here, people are like dying to hire people. And so you want to be an entrepreneur, but you also got to you got a lot of experience at the same time. So it's a very interesting time.
It actually reminds me of a story. We had actually Planet Fitness guy, Brian Pappas. I don't know if you know Brian. He's one of the early owners of franchises, and he came and spoke to students probably 5 years ago. And he was saying he had to sign his house as collateral to do the Planet Fitness. And he looked around the room and he said, you guys have nothing, you're not going to get kicked out of your dorm room. Like if he had failed, he was going to lose his house with his wife and his kids, but he's like, this is the time to do it. Like he was just so excited about this as a resource. This is the time actually to take risks because the bar is relatively low.
Don't kid yourself too. Also, personal relationships are key. You know, you can be on the phone, you can talk, but sometimes you got to get on a plane, you got to get in the car, and you got to go be in front of somebody. People do business where they do people with relationships, right? You got to do that. And COVID changed a little bit of that with Zoom, blah, blah, blah. Now we're starting to go back to Europe, reconnect with our customers, which you didn't do before. You save some money, you can do things, but at the high, but don't ever forget that personal touch. And we were talking about the trade shows. It reminded me of a thing years ago. My father's machine shop. There's a thing called the Moore jig borer. It was a very specific machine, and we had one of them. And we did a lot of aerospace, stuff that went to the moon, stuff that went in satellites, very close tolerance. And the machine, something crapped out on the machine. And it was going to be 6 weeks before they could get someone from Bridgeport, Connecticut, at Moore Jig Borer to come up and just fix it. Well, lo and behold, 6 months before that, I was down in New Orleans with Richard Moore and Al Schmedlin. And Richard Moore was the son of the guy that owned the Bridgeport company, right? And I made a phone call. In 2 days, the technician was going to get it fixed. So how do you put a price tag on that? That thing would have been down. We would have been late with our customers, couldn't get the product done. So it's because I had a personal relationship. I could pick up the phone and they could come help, you know.
Important.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
So going off of what you just said, how many people from when you were here at UNH have you contacted like semi-recently for your businesses? And I know it's probably more difficult for you guys because for me, I'm going to grow up and probably have like half the people in this room's contact information for the next 30 years. But for you guys, how have you used your relationships when you were here for now, for your businesses?
I was in Sigma Beta fraternity. So a lot of my Sigma Beta, I helped rebuild the fraternity. It was down and out 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when my company came in during the worst of times, couldn't even get a loan, and I rebuilt the whole thing. So I've developed a relationship with a lot of the, not only my alumni, but even the students. I have a guy that was the president 2 years ago, works for me now in sales. So I'm always trying to work with, in my adult friends that I went to school with here, I've networked with them. We always try to help, whether it's real estate or you have a question. So, you know, it's just kind of like friendships that you foster and find out what people are doing. I don't know what you guys
Back then
do.
it was a Rolodex. And
Yeah.
now you guys have social media and all kinds of stuff, and we're back on Facebook and stupid things like that. But it's a little bit different than when we were there. You had your friends, you call them on the telephone, you do that. But now I think generations or 20 years later, we're getting back more in touch with our friends because we can find them all. But in between that, there was a little bit of a lull in there because they could have moved to California. You had no way of even know where they were because it was a phone number. It wasn't a cell phone, it was a phone number. It was a fax or a landline. You had no means of communicating with the people that you met when you went to school with. And now that Facebook and this generation and that, oh, look at that, so-and-so I remember them. But we didn't have that back then, so it's a little bit different.
But it doesn't have to be just the people that you're meeting in your college. Like every day, it's who you're meeting on the street, and it's continuous. You know, that's actually one thing that I was always a very shy individual, and one of the things that I just wouldn't talk to people. I wouldn't, you go to the grocery store and go to the cashier and hi. This one will talk to anybody.
Probably like Tom.
Yeah, and he can change somebody's mood in a second. But he's going to be, his concept is that I make friends with everybody. No matter how you start the conversation, somebody can be in a bad mood, they can be griping at you. He's going to smile at them and be like, hey, I'm sorry you're having a bad day, so talk to me about what's going on. And he has created the biggest network of people everywhere. From the local hardware store, you don't know who you're meeting is going to someday help you. And you don't know, and trust me, you'll never know whether the person that you walk by is rich or poor, has connections that you don't know about. If any of you, I don't always wear a dress. Sometimes I'm in my spandex and walking in with my hair up in a ponytail. There was one point where somebody thought that I was his daughter because I had my hair up in a ponytail and my hair.
I never went back to that store again.
This was
right
many.
Here in Durham. You bring your daughter to college? Yeah. Thank you, but no.
Well, the tough thing is you kids, you can't, I say kids, but you can't make a mistake. You feel like you can't make a mistake because everything's transparent. I'm instantly, today you can find out anything about anybody almost, but don't worry about that. Don't let that get to your head because if you just keep playing through it, you'll be fine. When we were kids, we'd get all kinds of trouble and nobody would know about it and there wouldn't be any problems. But here, because I have 4 kids and 5 grandkids, I see a lot of anxiety that's unnecessary. And the biggest thing I would say to this group is don't worry about it. It's going to blow over. Like, they blow these things up and people get crazy about, oh my God, 6,000 people saw that on Facebook. They'll forget it tomorrow if you just focus on what you're doing and have fun. And so it's pretty scary because people overdwell on things that are going to be this huge thing. And Tom Brady, everybody looks at him, and the nicest thing I see about him is he's looking for tomorrow. He's not looking back. Like, that play's over, keep going. Where a lot of people get dwelling on what happened yesterday, what happened yesterday, what happened yesterday. And I had a friend commit suicide, and it was all about things that happened that were, as a friend of mine has another one was like, for one moment he made the biggest mistake of his life, and it would have blown over in 2 weeks because he thought it was this monumental thing. And I think your generation has been hit with something that almost as humans we don't know how to deal with it. So you just got to keep going forward, and if you believe in something and you believe in your people and you believe in your product, just keep going. And if it fails, get up and keep moving, because you're gonna have failures. If you're an entrepreneur, you're gonna have, it's like Tom's saying, I had this fail, that fail. But if you can have one or two things hit it and you can be proud of it, you're good. Because the other stuff, similar to Tom, I've had my share of things that have gone. And this buddy of mine, they made a permanent decision, of a bad decision that ultimately affected so many people. And if you just forgot about it and moved forward, yeah, it was an issue for a moment, but you just keep moving, and you'll have, in your career, you'll have these moments. They're inevitable. And some of them will be like 30 a week that feel like they're huge. The bank said no, this bank said no, that bank said no, this investor didn't put the money in, what are we gonna do now? Well, you just keep moving, and you keep, if you believe in your product, and if you believe in the systems, and you believe in what you have, I've shut down 6 restaurants and had products that have failed and had recalls and had issues, and you just have to keep moving, and you have to believe, and you have to keep going. But, the failures are gonna come, but if you focus on the next play, the next game, the next product, you're gonna get through it.
So that's a great, thank you, Fred, and thank you for sharing. So let's flip this now a little bit. So I'm gonna call on a couple of you, and then a couple of you can volunteer to talk about, explain what your business is and or your idea, and then a problem you're having that you might be able to get some sage advice about. So Stephen, I'm gonna start with you. So you're there, and everybody was interested. We looked at the wall, the student wall, so.
So my name's Stephen Schnobrick. I graduated in the spring of 2021. I was part of the ECenter since maybe 2019, 2018. I first came to Ian with an idea for a golf cart punching bag. Stop taking your anger out on the clubs, slamming your clubs. And one of the great things that Ian told me was that he doesn't tell people when their ideas are good or not. He shows them, which kind of felt like a jab at me at the time, I thought. But he taught us about customer discovery, and that was a huge part of it. So what I thought was going to be as easy as kind of finding stock parts and putting them together and repurposing them became a 3-year process of me learning AutoCAD, learning how to design things, work with websites, and eventually coming to a point where just this past year, in April, we started selling it officially. So it's been, like you guys said, it's a long journey, and I feel like I'm only getting started because I really am. And a big part of everything that I did, and the reason why I kept going after countless models and iterations that completely failed, was because I started loving the process of it. I started loving how to learn these different tools that I need to try to make a company. And thanks to Ian and the ECenter, and the makerspace specifically, they had a lot of those resources available. But that's kind of a long-winded answer on me and what my company does, kind of the story. But if
talk a little about how many units you've sold, and then a specific problem you have that they can help.
So we started selling in April, and we've sold just over 800 units now. It's been going great, really. We've sold out of inventory 6 times, so supply chain management has been really one of the big things that we've been working on, and kind of managing when I have to order more inventory and handling that whole process. And I also have my website run through Shopify, so that's another side of it. So I guess, I mean, a question from inventory supply chain management standpoint, do you have any methods of not calculating, but kind of getting ahead of it, getting ahead of the inventory run out so we don't have these lull periods where we're out of inventory, to kind of stay on top of it?
Yeah. I think the challenge you're describing is the challenge that a lot of companies, when they're first starting, the most valuable thing you have is that product, because if it's in the wrong place, you're not going to get it to the customers when they want it. And whether it be on a ship or at a port or in the wrong warehouse or still at the factory. One of the things that we coach our entrepreneurs or our merchants on is really understanding when to buy that inventory and looking at the forecast. And that's almost impossible to be able to do, but it sounds like your product probably does better in certain seasons than others, although right now obviously golf is probably in season everywhere. I suspect it'll start winding down in the Northeast. But looking at providing some predictability, I think, is going to be the challenge there. And some of that will happen as you start finding distribution channels for your product, because they're going to create demand for that product, and you don't have to worry about selling it to the end consumer and the end customer at that point. So I would suspect that you're going to want to get some recurring revenue and customers that are buying in greater quantities to provide some more stability for that. And then your direct-to-consumer business can float on top of that and benefit from the volumes that you're pushing through these indirect channels. So that's one of the areas that we talk about if you want to go that route, right? That's a decision that you have to make as a business. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I have another question, if that's okay, and kind of directed to you, Tanya, actually, and I mean really everybody, but I read specifically in your bio that at EnviroVantage you scaled from 4 employees to now you said was I think 132, something like that. And I was wondering if you could explain kind of the process of hiring that you've taken, and specifically, and how do you know when to hire? You mentioned that as well, kind of managing that. What's been the best method to find employees that bring a lot of value to the company? And then finally, how do you ensure that your employees remain happy and excited with the work that they're doing so that they continue to output?
That's a great question.
I wish I knew. Yeah.
Answer that. I'd love to hear.
At least
It's like an interview going on.
your best perspective on it, at least.
There's no one answer to it, because depending on who your market is, they have different needs. Your white collar usually has a different need than your blue collar worker. You have to come up with incentives that are meaningful and hopefully are not a big cash draw for you as much as possible. I mean, there are things that you're going to need as you grow, but they're going to be hard to do as a small company. So you have to find those incentives and figure out what it is your people want. So some of that comes down to, what our generation wants versus what your generation wants. And, you hear of a lot of companies that will do things like set up a rec room for people so they can just take a break from everything. How you interact with people is huge. You get more from people by being a mentor and being a teacher than you do by being a taskmaster.
I'll add on to that word of mouth. We use a lot of people, you said, do you know somebody that wants to come work here? Do you have a good environment? Do you have all those types of things? Because they could bring we have an incentive program, right? So the guy stays for 6 months, 12 months, you're gonna get paid for that. We have boot programs for stuff. We have all kinds of really unique things to the individuals, but a lot of it's word of mouth. If you have somebody, you go out to that board out there and you find somebody on it that has the same interests and the same cares. When you get larger, you may need a very specific robotics engineer, and then you may have to go to a headhunter or something like that. But as a small startup, you're going to just have to ask friends, word of mouth, things through the graduates here at UNH or things like that you can have. And my dad used to work at UNH. He was director of purchasing, and he went back to the high schools and said, who needs a break? And he'd hire people right out of high school that needed a break, and they'd come work for him and work up through the thing. So granted, you're younger, but you go back to the high schools and the tech schools and things like that, depending on what you need. I think it's a great idea. A lot of angry golfers. I think the one thing I'd add to this, and probably a lot of us here have the same thing, is that that's one product. What's your next product? What's your bundle product? And then everybody else here is probably, what's your exit strategy? It may seem a little early to do an exit strategy, but if this thing works and it blows up and a golf company came and wanted to buy it, you got to have an answer, and you got to know what you want to do, because people will hold on to stuff for way too long and then it goes away. But what are bolt-on products that you can have and actually build a full line and a full company, or just, is this my product and then I'm going to unload it? But you could have a whole product line of, go with your product name, what's your brand, what's all that type of stuff. And there's a lot of angry golfers. They got to punch a lot of things, but when they punch it, they need something else on the side of that,
First aid kit.
The first aid kit, a bandage or a splint thing, whatever it may be. But always trying to have an exit strategy and figure out what you're going to do down the road, because that comes real quick. Because you may saturate the market and everybody buys one, and every golf club in the country buys one, then you got to feel gag gift. So what's your market look like after you've sold to everybody? I don't know, just...
I had a golf business that failed. Well, it didn't fail. I gave it to the guy that I started with. It's called Country Club Stock, and we got Seiko watches, and we used to logo the different clubs, with the Catanset or whatever golf club you had, and he was selling it to the pros, and that's how they built it. It was a very interesting business. He's doing okay now, but I got out of it. But it was an interesting thing that you're saying. But we had to look. I went to the golf show down in Orlando. I remember that, and we had to get a watch, to expand our. Your line, so you had a lot to offer, because it was more gifts for, when you had events, Your product is interesting, but to go to the employees, make it fun to work there. Know who's working there. Doesn't mean like on Monday night, hey, after work, guys, I'm going to get some pizza and beer. We're going to go to my house. We're going down the bar, and we're going to watch Monday Night Football. Or at noontime, get a cornhole game outside. Just you figure out what works.
French Fry Friday.
Yeah.
And exactly. I still, every month and every year, I handwrite birthday cards and anniversary cards to the company after 38 years.
Yeah.
I usually get a really nice personal one.
It goes a long way when you
It's a huge way.
When you engage, like I walk around the plant, I know there's kids, I know what problems they've had, what good things are going to happen, and you always walk around so people look, wow, he really cares, which I do. I mean, I genuinely do. And that's what builds a good thing. When we really hit on the N95 mask, if we had a good month, nobody used to know this, but I would show up and have a company meeting, and I went around and gave everybody $100, $200, sometimes $300 cash. I just go into petty cash, grab it, and I said, we had a good month this month, and just go I would just go out and have dinner on the company and thank you for all your work. They used to look forward to that like you have no idea, and I didn't really realize after how appreciative people were. Just a little gesture like that, how far it goes.
And what we think is big, we think is big.
Yeah.
What they think is big and what we think is big may be different.
That's kind of another side of it. You mentioned that as you've grown, since you started when you were junior in college, I mean, you've obviously scaled all the way up. And you said that you heard the employees might have mentioned to you or you noticed that they wanted a retirement plan, healthcare. Did that come from them asking you specifically in those early years when they said, we need this, or is that kind of on your side?
I think you got to pay attention to grumblings. Like an employee manual. I'm like, I don't need an employee. You work every day. Well, okay, do we have this holiday off? Don't we have that holiday off? Do we have this off? Do we have Thursday off? Do we have the day before Thanksgiving? Like, you get 1,000 questions. You're like, I can't do that anymore. So you got to make a policy. And a lot of the stuff comes to policy. So we're hiring a person that graduated from here, who's going to take over as president of my company, because I don't want to do that anymore. And I think probably like some of us here, we've kind of outstayed our welcome in some places and maybe a little bit tainted and not as nice as we should be because we've seen it 10,000 times. And I'm not saying we're mean, but I'm like, I've already told 12,000 people not to do that. So why are we still doing it? But, little things like that, try and grow, get people that you can help and do and pay attention. What's a whisper is what you should be paying attention to. A grumbling, or it's always a side comment. Like, where'd that come from? And then you ask around, like, okay, that's real. And if you don't pay attention to those, it can sneak right up on you and then whack you in the back of the head and you have no idea what happened. And you can't let that happen. But pay attention to, everybody here pays attention to their employees. If you don't, then you feel like you're this and this. and you're the big bad boss, and we're just the peon workers, and you can never let that happen.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to open it up. So I'm going to ask Kendra to explain about Kokori and a question you have.
Okay. I also, while I have the floor, have y'all ever heard of Ikigai? A couple people? Okay, so this is just your question, Rita. But Ikigai is the convergence of 4 areas of life: what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. So it's a fun. It probably has quizzes and stuff online. Okay, so yeah, so speaking of company culture and building positive relationships, yeah, so I have a little bit of a different background. I actually had no interest in entrepreneurship whatsoever. I saw business as kind of a bad word when I was in college. I really saw myself as a support person as well, definitely not a CEO in any way. And yeah, I became a school social worker, so I'm a little bit older than most of y'all. A lot of you guys know my story. I'm getting a doctorate right now at UNH, and that's my professor calling. Yeah, I ended up getting into school social work. So I worked for 6 years as a school social worker. As you're talking about kind of the relationships that you've had and the experiences you had, I learned so many different strategies. I ran social emotional learning in different schools, learned all these different social emotional learning programs. I attended a conference where I met tons of facilitators. And like all of that is now a part of my platform today, as I look back and realize kind of like all these different pieces and things that I loved to do that I signed up for, they're all a part of what I do. And I fell in love with team building specifically. So using experiential social emotional learning activities to work with kids. I was really great with like 1 kid, 3 kids, but a classroom was not my forte. I'm with you, Tanya. And so I did a lot of training, a lot of conferences, workshops. And at the end of one, I needed something for my practice. And what I needed was a ring of problem solving initiatives, a ring of icebreakers, like easy access to these activities that I loved. And one set, I was like, I really don't want to spend a Saturday like laminating, cutting, what a pain. It'd be so much easier if it was an app. So that's where my idea came from. After that, I ended up doing a master's program. And I basically, part of the master's program, we went camping for 10 days. And the girl that I was like camping with, she heard me talk about this app for 1.5 years. And at the end, she's like, if you really want to do this, I'll do it with you. And I moved to Chile at that point, kind of just because I wanted to. And I was still like invested in like, let me learn how to do these team building activities, but I ended up being able to teach English to adults. And through that, a lot of my adult students were developers. So I got into the Chilean startup ecosystem. My app prototype was developed by one of my English students. I also learned about the Canvas business model through trading English lessons and my website, and I went trail running as well. And then I met a professor at the University of New Hampshire. I told him I want to prove that this methodology works. And he invited me here 3 years ago, and that's really where kind of the entrepreneurship took off. I met Ian the first week, and he trained, we were able to win the SVIC and Holloway. Had amazing summer interns the last 3 years through a lot of the programs here. So Gunnar was like our super stellar, we talk about him every week, intern this last summer, and we built a community-driven platform of experiential social emotional learning activities. So we have over 80 contributors on the platform, over 800 activities. We align with social emotional learning standards, 21st century skills, SDGs. We just reached 11,000 users, and we have 28 B2B organizations, schools and organizations. So bringing it to Cambridge Ridge and Latin, Portsmouth. I'm talking with Oyster River if y'all know anyone over there. And some other schools across the country and actually in Canada. So we are 8 women on our core team, 1.5 FTE. We built everything from December last year prior. This year we were able to bring on 360K in January and March and built out our team. And that is, we launched the platform January last year.
Question?
And so my question, I have a lot of questions. But okay, so the biggest is kind of what you were just talking about, Scott, like once you've got to look at the next big thing, and like do Do I have to let go? And then that's also kind of related to like investment. I've always been torn, like how much time should I spend on just revenue, like bringing sales in myself? If I spend all this time that I'm doing fundraising on sales, what could I do? We just brought in a new team member and she's like, we're in a 750K raise right now. We're doing that. She's like, bring in $1 million, bring in $2 million. And that's my question is like, how much is too much? So I guess, yeah. How does fundraising fit into your story? What are your advice? What are your warnings? And I know it's supposed to end in an exit. It needs to end in an exit. Does it have to? Is that like a physical product that could saturate the market? Those are my questions.
I think the one thing I look at, you get to a breaking point in your personal life that you just can't do it anymore, or you can't do it well anymore, and you've got too many other things. That's when you get to that point where you've got to make that step and hire somebody. And it's a tough hire because they don't always do it the way you do. You don't always do everything. But then you've got to look at your product and say, what am I really here for? Am I here to make phone calls and fundraise, or am I here to develop the product because I know the product and I know what we need and what we need to do? Have somebody else do, we've probably all found, have somebody else do the things that they do best, so that you can focus on what's going to be your end game, because you may take that product and you can sell it to somebody. Always look for somebody that you can sell it to. You can, but you're also early on in it. So you can love it, and then you can get beat up 6 ways to Sunday, or you can't make that next step without money. Yeah. And that's one of the big problems. You can have this great idea, but it'll take $1 million or $2 million to launch it. You know it'll work. Then you've got to package and say, I can't physically do this, but I can package it and then present it to somebody to buy. A big player in the industry. You always want to watch the big players in your industry because they're always looking for you. And then if you're packaging it for that because you can't do it, and if it's global, how would you possibly take that global from Durham, New Hampshire, or wherever? So there's a little bit more than that, but you need suppliers, you need people to pitch it, you need big money sometimes, and maybe you don't because it's all web-based. But you're always going to be looking at all those different opportunities. I don't know what anybody else has to say about that.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say a different perspective, to think about it. You got to start thinking, how much is enough? How much money do you need? What do you want? How do you want to live your life? I would strongly recommend be happy. Bigger isn't always better, okay? You know what I mean? Like if I could do 10 million in sales and make 10% profit, I could probably do 5 million in sales, make 20%. I'm working half as much, but I'd be happy. I wouldn't have all these headaches. It's just a perspective, you know what I mean? And that's a personal decision that you have to make. You might be, I just heard you say you love what you do. I don't want to let it go. That resonates. I get it, right? So maybe bigger isn't better for you. Maybe you just scale it to where you're happy and where you go. But I do think at some point, like Scott was saying, and Jerome, they can weigh in, is that you might build it to a point that you can have an exit strategy sometime when you're done with it, or you want to move on and do the next thing. And you might have a pause for 5 years and pick it up again, or you might be fine the way it is. Just a perspective. I've always said it with my employees, bigger isn't always better. When we were going through that tremendous growth with the N95 masks, this is a true story. In 2020, I was watching the soul of my company, I'll say in a way, deteriorating a little bit, we were like a family kind of business. It's how you go in the walls, there's a picture of all the employees. I knew I knew everybody. And we grew so fast. We went from like 23 employees to 75. We were the number one growing, we got on Inc. Whatever it is, 5,000. We were the fastest growing company in New Hampshire, number one. And that took its toll on my company. And what you were talking about earlier, I felt I was losing the soul of my company. I sat in the conference room that I was going to we built a whole new, manufacturing area so we could keep up with demand. I sat there in tears, literally, because I was going to wipe it out. I had so many memories in there with employees, Christmas parties, and that physical space was gone. And I got everybody together because I could feel that everybody was on edge. And we had a lot to do. We had a big responsibility to help the country and the nation. I really put them on a guilt trip. That we're here, you can't get COVID, you've got to be here, you've got to leave the work and take care of yourself. We had a protocol that you had to clean your hands, temperature check, and if you were sick, you went home. Because there was a lot of people that depended on us. It was a crisis. But I got everybody together because I could feel the rumblings, right? And I get the whole company together and I said, let me tell you, if this thing gets out of hand, I'm shutting everything down. We're going to go back and we're going to scale down. I don't give a shit about being big. It's not what matters to me. Well, I bared my soul to everybody. And I think everybody respected that. And they liked that I said that I acknowledged it, because it was too much too quick. Right? It was. And so, I'm just trying to give you a perspective. I just lived this 2 years ago. So you love what you do, stay with that, be happy, but also know that you got maybe a tiger by the tail, and just scale it the way you feel comfortable. Sorry.
That's fine. I would say there's a couple of other options too. I mean, having been in the venture-backed community for a long time, you have to be careful what you wish for sometimes. So, at Six River, we raised $46 million in 3 years, 2.5 years, 3 years. We had a good exit. But again, talk about, opportunity knocking. You kind of have to make a decision when that knock comes in the door, and you have to have the answer. You have to have the answer. But when you bring on venture capital, you're opening up the doors to a very, very, very different relationship with your business. It's different even than private equity, right? It's just there's a different expectation there. And I think the one option that you have here, if you want to stay in the business, is bring in a partner, bring in a co-founder, give somebody in that loves the business as much as you do, and maybe you have an opportunity to split the responsibilities up potentially. Maybe you have the opportunity to focus on one side of it. And I'll just share with you, in our business, we had three co-founders, but really 2 people who ran the business. We were co-CEOs. I handled the commercials, I handled the fundraising, I handled the product. My partner, Rylan, did all the operational stuff. And that was a wonderful marriage and one that was very successful because it allowed us to move twice as fast. We weren't single-threaded through a single person. And we had implicit trusts, right? So when I was going out fundraising or trying to close a big customer, I knew that he would be able to make the operations work and take care of the things at corporate and make sure that the robots were getting built and all that kind of good stuff. That relationship, I think, is a very powerful relationship. And it allows also the sharing of risk. And it also allows, very simply, when investors look at you, that there's actually a succession plan built in place to this organization, right? Something could go haywire, whatever, there's balance there. So that's just another perspective.
Or marry into it.
You could,
Yeah.
right. So
That's great. Thank you very much. Derek, you were kind enough to ask the first question and tease blockchain out of Fred. So why don't you explain a little bit about your idea, and then maybe one problem that you have that you like advice on.
Yeah, awesome. So my company's Coinalytica. Think of it as a crypto business analytics venture. Just think of it, Google Analytics for crypto companies. One thing we saw, at least the past bull run, I've been very involved in crypto for a long time, so I'm happy to talk about that for hours. But regardless, one thing we saw was the actual development of business models. It wasn't just launching a token. It wasn't launching just a collection. It was oh, great, you lost the collection. Now what's the community? What's the business model? How are you going to make a sustainable business? And one thing you'll see, especially in Web 2 models or selling on Shopify or being more involved in the e-commerce space, is analytics. You need to know more about your business in order to grow it. And that's something we don't have with a lot of blockchain businesses. So we basically found some proprietary technology we developed that allowed us to basically, hey, you put our API code into your website and we'll generate customer analytics. We'll tell you exactly where your customers are, all while maintaining user privacy and data anonymity. So basically in aggregate, we protect our users, but also provide insights to the companies themselves. Actually, one problem that we've had is actually that happened this morning. So my co-founder, actually one of our co-founders, had another business that's been running another DAO project. He went radio silent for about 2 weeks. It's early company, you haven't written any incorporation documents yet, but that was basically this happened this week, and he raised $200,000 for his other business. Now he is leaving. So, but at the same time, he wants to leave, but take equity, but nothing's been signed yet. So what has been your experience with having maybe problems with your co-founders, that kind of thing? How do you solve those kinds of issues when maybe something hasn't been signed? Or, that's currently the hot topic in the room. So if you guys have any insights, would appreciate it.
So you've got a co-founder that's raised $200,000. He's leaving the business, but he wants to have equity in the company. Does he have equity in the company now? Is there any stocks or anything?
Nothing has been signed.
Bye-bye. Let him go. Just let him go. He's on to another thing. Because unless he's going to stay there and put money in or equity, he
left,
gets nothing.
He left you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
He
it's
left
over.
you.
And that's the biggest problem is he's now saying like, oh, well, I helped develop the idea, I have
No.
this.
That's too
Yeah,
bad.
too bad he left. Do you guys know the place Fried that's in town? Yeah. A friend of mine, her son developed that, and he had something happen that one of the kids that started it with him bailed out on him. Like, Derek is the one, Jabadlo? Yeah, Derek is the one that I know. One of the guys that helped, and it was the craziest thing. These kids started this thing like late at night. They went down Wildcat and they had a ghost kitchen. And then you guys, all the fried food, so everybody goes down late at night and eats and drinks or whatever you do.
Carl's.
And it's like a Carl's or a Fritz, right? But he had, but what he had is, because he came to me for advice, I've just known him for years, and he had one of his partners just bailed on him. I mean, this kid lived at his house, the mother fed him, he helped him out, and he decided up and leave, and he thought he actually took the company truck with him, which he didn't pay for, and he left. And I said, Derek, he's gone. So they make sure, he had 7 people originally. I said, you are headed for a train wreck, dude. I said, yeah, he had 7 partners. And eventually, it was a hobby, and everybody graduated and got on to the real lives, but Derek was still hanging on to it, his original idea. So now I think it's just him or maybe someone else, but when he left, he was out, and that's what I would tell you, he's gone. It's okay, no harm, no foul, but you made your decision, like Scott said, he left, right, Jerome?
And the next thing that kind of came up is when we mentioned that.
More equity for you.
The next thing he mentions when that happened, he's like, all right, well, what if you go into stealth mode and wait till I'm done with this business? So now he doesn't want to leave, he wants to hang on. So I'm just like, it's
He's
a
not
total...
committed.
Exactly. And
He's
that's
not
the biggest
committed,
thing.
or he
And
should
you're
be
lucky
committed.
he's like he doesn't have any documents
he
signed
just
to get
wants-
him in.
he wants to
Now
be
with
on-
divorce, that's
He
more
wants
of
to
a
be on
pain
your
in the-
coattails.
Yep, he wants
And
the best of both worlds. Can't do it.
Not gonna happen.
Can't have your 18
No.
But yeah, that's the current as of this morning. So.
It's all done now.
So we have about 10 more minutes left. I'm going to turn it over to Joel, also a young alum. So Joel, why don't you just talk a little bit about Ecotext and a single problem that you might have.
Sure. So I graduated at UNH 2018, studied electrical engineering. And one thing that I didn't really have the foresight on coming into my freshman year was how expensive engineering textbooks were. So you get your syllabus, you go to the bookstore, it's $200, $300, and now you start to have to make weird decisions. And as an 18, 19-year-old, it's not feasible, right? So Ecotext really stemmed from that frustration semester after semester. And really it wasn't until my senior year where we actually took it seriously. I met with Ian and realized that there was business competitions that gave money just for having good ideas. So I wish I knew that starting my freshman year. I would have been racking up a lot of cash. But we built the team, we raised money. The whole concept was essentially Spotify for digital textbooks. COVID-19 was an interesting year because obviously everything was shut down and we needed to be virtual. So it gave us a lot of momentum to raise capital and to actually acquire our first customers and actually get out there to the market. But now coming into 2022, it's a different dynamic as smaller schools, they're more stressed about their enrollments, and those librarians and more kind of administrative customers have smaller budgets and don't have some of the volatility or kind of the financial, let's say, freedom to spend on additional resources. So we're in an interesting period where we actually might be shifting more towards partnerships. On the publishing side, they want to go straight to students and direct to consumers. So I guess my question to put for you guys talked about it in a little bit, is having to adapt. And I'd love to get your insights on maybe the strongest indicators that you look for to make the determination like, okay, we need to shift this model, or we need to go about, approaching customers in, maybe a different way. So I'd like to get your insight there.
So one of my ideas would be look at other platforms, because it sounds like it's a platform to distribute textbooks to an end user. So I would look at other platforms that are doing that and see how that works, and then look at their revenues and look at how they expanded and how they did all that, and see what is different with yours than theirs, what makes yours different for yours than theirs, and expound on that, as opposed to, we're just going to plug forward and then talk to the kids. What do they want? I mean, your issue was money. I think a lot of the stuff now is the issue, easeability of not having to go down and buy $700 worth of textbooks and put them in a backpack like we used to have to do. And then I would think that how that money transfers for the professor writing the textbook that they're having the kids use, what's their perspective? How much do they want? And where do you carve out your piece? That'd be my kind of guess on that.
Are you selling textbook now that you're selling digital textbooks that you're?
Yeah, so we actually just hired a director of content acquisition. So we're now working with bigger publishers to acquire their catalog and then basically do a flat fee at the student level.
Is it textbooks that are required, or is it textbooks that you're trying to get required, or people to write new textbooks?
No, so it's already existing content, and so it's really about identifying the ones that are in the most demand, right? So it could be required for a syllabus, or it could be just additional research. So the use case could.
How many competitors do you have? Like, I don't even know if there's 30 people doing it, 30 companies, or.
There's I would say half a dozen that fit in the category of kind of a flat rate subscription all digitally, and a good chunk of them are actually overseas. So in the UK, it's pretty prominent.
What can you do to make somebody want to buy yours more than somebody else's? Is there a digital connection, or is there
ability to highlight or
I'm a freshman or sophomore.
search.
Why am I going to go with your company versus somebody else's company? Is there something that's happened to you that's notoriety that somebody says, okay, what's your brand? What's the brand of the?
Sure, yeah. For us specifically, our distinguishing factor is collaboration. So it's adding that social layer on top of the textbook, so you can, take iBooks or Kindle, create a note, highlight, but you can attach and tag our people, embed videos, embed widgets. So it's contextualizing the content and kind of almost customizing the metadata on top of it.
So can you get like endorsements, or in products right now, the big star factor of having somebody drinking your product or somebody doing your product? Is there a school or somebody, well, this is used by more of our students, whether they're UNH students or USC students, have purchased our platform because they found they did better with it, or testimonials are big, right? So how do you somehow digitally do that? And then the only other advice is making sure you got margin enough in it to spend the marketing dollars that the platform's going to work. So, like a lot of times I see people, they have no margin, but they're going to sell a lot of things. But if you can develop the model where you have the margin and you can get the exposure at the same time because it's digital, that we were talking about this earlier, it can blow up quick, because today, and you can have 1 million people see something quicker than you ever did before if you can do it on some type of social media. But I don't know, in the technology world, it's happening all the time where somebody says, well, this is a better software program, let's go to that quickly. Or I didn't know about Shopify 3 years ago, and now we're using it and this one's using it. But it seemed like it happened overnight, so maybe it can happen in your business as well. To get somebody to endorse it and somehow, or others endorsing it digitally. And I know nothing about your business, but it just seems.
Are you guys just B2B, Joel?
So most of our revenue has come from B2B means, from community colleges. But yeah, now we're diving into kind of the B2C play and examining that.
Have you thought of the community aspect of, if you're reading this textbook or whatever, how could you connect with other people that are reading the same textbook with discussions and talking and collaboration, and is that part of the platform as well?
Study group, a virtual study group.
Yeah. That's really the essence of it. Is that students can collaborate, whether it's a small group or can collaborate across the class, across the university.
Oh, that's great. I think that would be a big selling point that you can get.
And that's a feature.
Yeah, huge feature that
people.
you're not the only one reading this boring textbook at 2:00 in the morning.
The other thing too, I think, when it's distribution like that, exclusivity is also important, right? So if you can get exclusivity on or distribution rights from a publisher or whatever else for a period of time, for a region, that's going to force them to go through your platform and force traffic through your platform. So I think that's something you want to think about. And it may very well be, like you were in EE, right? It may very well be, circuits and design, volume edition 3, 4, whatever, and there's only 5 colleges that require it, but you own the distribution rights for that. So now all of a sudden they have to go to you. right? I think that creates, and then you can build a platform around that. So just something to think about.
And you probably could get that if he sets parameters that are reasonable and you meet certain goals.
Pretty cheap. Yeah.
It renews itself. In other words,
Right.
you don't
Also-
get, like if you get it for 3 years, you don't get bounced after 3 years.
That's
So it's
right.
a great idea.
Yep.
As long as you've achieved certain levels of sales,
Yep.
you get to keep going on, because what they'll do is they'll bump you and they'll take it over.
And they'll start,
Yeah.
building some, and then at that point that you develop that channel, you may be able to get exclusive, unique content that is only available through you. And at that point, you've got a differentiation, right? It's not just the book, but now it's the professor's notes on the book that the students will like, or whatever else, So.
Yeah, and then you get a captive audience, and then anybody that's got new content might say, "Listen, Joel, we'd like to
Right.
put on your thing because you've been so successful with all these other things. You get more business that way."
I'd get a brand too. Try and get your brand, so that people, it's talked about on campus, it's talked about everywhere, so that they say, I want to go with that brand, and because other people want to put their product on your brand because it's a hot topic on campuses.
The other big thing happened today. I was with Uber, and all of a sudden I don't even know what language it was, but I had to press translate, and all of a sudden he translated it automatically into English, and the Uber driver back and forth, and I didn't even really know what language I was translating from. He's sending it to me, and I had to press translate, and it was just that quick. So the foreign market is huge, right, for education. So if you have and can translate digitally your books, and you could specialize in other countries, that might be a whole other market that you're not thinking about. That could be huge, because what would have taken a lot of money and energy, today there are programs that'll translate, and you may be able to, I don't know how far along you are, but sometimes jumping to something completely separate where there maybe is nobody doing that for developing countries or whatever, it's huge. That, to me, that this whole education world has been completely flipped upside down, where you would never think to get an education or learn something online, it's going to keep going in that direction. So what you're doing may be bigger in, undeveloped South America or some other, somewhere else, Russia, for whatever.
Probably stay away from there. Just
There might
curious,
be some
on the
supply chain
content
issues,
side,
just saying.
is that with Tim's company or somebody else?
Say again?
Is that with Tim's company or somebody else?
Yeah, so EBSCO, but we actually, there's 2 other companies in the UK.
Right, so I just want to talk about, the UNH connection. So Tim was inducted last year into the Hall of Fame from EBSCO, and Joel connected with him, and we're talking about the content partnerships, and that sort of opened up a door about understanding that. So you talk about connections within, right? So Charlie, you asked about the network for half the people in this room. I'll guarantee it's going to be the entire room for you. But it's also relationships that you meet. The connection of UNH, doors open automatically. Your call, your email generally will always be taken because they've sat where you've sat, and they're going to offer you 5 or 10 minutes to help out wherever they can. So just remember that part, that's you're part of a very tight group. So we are at 5 o'clock. I believe in keeping the schedule as best as possible, so we're going to do that. The good news is, so there's a break, so inductees get a little break, a little food before they have to do their next round of the full induction. But as you know, there is a reception after that, which will be in Ham-Smith downstairs. So for those of you, I know many of you have questions and are working on ideas that you would love to talk about. Some may be related to Shopify, some not. Feel free to be able to talk to them at the reception and to continue the conversation. But for now, I want to thank the 5 of you for taking the time for being here and for meeting these amazing students. Thank you so much.